This is the 24-70 and this is the 24-120. And today I want to give you a full comparison between these two lenses by going over the biggest differences such as aperture, focal length, and even ergonomics to help you decide which lens is better for you. Let's first talk about the biggest differences between these two lenses. Because if we zoom both of these lenses out to the longest focal length, you'll see that the 24-120 is 50mm longer than the 24-70. This comes out to an increase from 70mm all the way to 120mm and has major implications for your photography. As the 24-120mm gives you a medium telephoto focal length, that's perfect for isolating farther away subjects or adding compression into the frame. Having that extra 50mm gives us more range and more flexibility to craft that perfect composition compared to the 24-70. It's especially useful in niches where the scenery is out of your control, such as street or landscape photography, because these subjects tend to vary in terms of distance. Having the extra focal length gives you more reach in case you need it. But when we look over at the 24-70, we only get 70mm on the long end, which is still considered a standard focal length. And there was just a lot of times when using the 24-70 where I felt like I just didn't have enough reach during those run and gun situations. I'd find myself a little short and wishing I had a longer focal length to frame my subject in the exact way that I want. However, when it comes to shooting more controlled scenes like portraits, I found that 70mm is more than long enough. You can always move forward and backward to change your composition to whatever you want it to be, without worrying about having too short of a focal length. But if the scene wasn't controlled and you can't move back and forth very easily, then that's where the 24-70 will struggle, which is where the 24-120 excels at and is the biggest advantage it has over the 24-70. Even though the focal length is the biggest difference between these two lenses, the aperture is probably the second biggest difference. The aperture between these two lenses couldn't be more different. We have the 24-120 coming in at f4, while the 24-70 is an f2.8 lens. This may not seem like a huge difference at first, but going from 2.8 to f4 is double the aperture. And more than anything, this makes a big difference in low light situations. The 24-70 definitely excels in this area. Having an f2.8 aperture is especially useful when shooting photos at nighttime or indoors photography, such as events. This helps us get images with a lower ISO and faster shutter speed to come out with images that look clean straight out of camera. The 24-120, however, is a lot slower because of that f4 aperture and will struggle in low light situations in particular. What's even tougher is that the 24-120 is longer than the 24-70, and this makes it difficult to use the entirety of the lens in low light. Because when we have a longer focal length, we have to increase our shutter speed to ensure the images don't have motion blur. But when our lens's aperture is at f4, this can be challenging. As when I was using this lens, I tended to stay away from using the long focal length on the end, as this would lead to an increased ISO and more grain. This really limits the 24-120 in low light situations and causes you to not use the full extent of the lens's focal length. Granted, this isn't going to be a big issue when we're shooting in broad daylight, and to be honest with you, this isn't a lens that I use much in low light situations anyways. But the low light performances between these two lenses is quite stark, and if you find yourself shooting in low light situations, then the 24-70 will be your best bet. However, something else that's a big deal when it comes to these lenses apertures is how the bokeh will look. And for me, this is something I was concerned about when switching over from the 24-70 to the 24-120. For starters, the 24-70 definitely delivers more background blur than the 24-120. With the 24-70 creating the most bokeh when shot at 70mm and f2.8. And the images look very pleasant with plenty of background blur, but being shot at f2.8 means we actually see more of our subject in focus without such a steep fall off compared to faster lenses. It's nice, especially when shooting multiple people, to get more of them in focus. The f2.8 aperture helps to bring out your main subject much more and is nice for creating a sense of isolation in the image. But if we take a look at the other side of the coin, the 24-120 won't deliver the same level of bokeh as the 24-70. Of course, this is because of the lens's f4 aperture, which is to be expected. But what about its 120mm focal length? Surely it should help add more bokeh to your subject. And it definitely does. If you wanted to maximize the lens's bokeh, you can shoot at 120mm in order to get more of it. When you do capture the image, the bokeh is quite pleasant and does fall off very smoothly, while keeping your main subject in focus and very sharp at that. This is especially a bonus when shooting macro images. A bonus that the 24-120mm does have over the 24-70 is that it can focus much closer, so this can definitely increase the amount of bokeh. But when shooting portraits in particular, which is the main niche that really cares about bokeh, the 24-70 is still a better option. f4 versus f2.8 is a big difference, and if you are focused on maximizing your bokeh, the 24-70 would be your best bet. If we take a look at both lenses, we can see that they're both built very well. Both lenses offer metal mounts and are built with plastic around it. This is nice to help keep the weight down and make the lenses lighter overall. However, I did find that the 24-70 is built a bit better than the 24-120, mainly because the plastics are a bit nicer and feel more premium. But when using either of these lenses, they feel pretty similar to each other, and you're not going to notice a big difference when you're out on the field. If we look at their actual weights, we'll find that the 24-70 is 805 grams, with the 24-120 being at 630 grams. It might not seem that drastic at first glance, but when you handle and use these lenses for a longer period of time, it does make a big difference. The 24-120 simply balances a lot better paired with a body like the Z6 III. The weight puts less strain on your wrist and feels more comfortable to hold for longer periods of time, whereas the 24-70 is a bigger lens overall and will make the Z6 III feel slightly lens heavy. But when it comes to controls and features, both of these lenses are very similar, with them both having a control ring to adjust your different settings. I found the 24-120mm control ring to be a tad nicer, with a little more resistance and a ribbed texture that helps to differentiate it from the focus ring. The ring feels more stable overall and is a nicer experience to use, especially if you need to dial in on a specific camera setting. Both lenses also feature a programmable function button to change whatever setting needs to be changed in a pinch. Something the 24-70 has that the 24-120 doesn't is a display on the top of the lens. For the most part, I don't really use it unless it's to show something on video. But it is nice to display your aperture, focus position, or even the focal length to be more precise when shooting. It's another addition that makes a 24-70mm feel more high-end, but it's not that necessary to use when you're shooting. Last but not least are these lenses filter thread, with the 24-70 coming in at 82mm and the 24-120 being at 77mm. Not a huge difference, but if you're like me and have all of your filters in 82mm, this can make a slight difference. But if you've been watching this video and are still unsure about which lens is best for you, I think this next part should help. You are now at the point where you're trying to decide between these two lenses and you're wondering which one is right for me. So let's first talk about the 24-120. This lens is perfect for run and gun photography, where you'll be outside and have scenes that offer you minimal control over. Niches like street, landscape, and nature benefit from the 24-120mm long focal range, and is nice to get the exact composition you want. Being able to go to 120mm on the long end does make a big difference in determining whether or not you can capture an image. You'll tend to struggle most in those low light situations, as you'll be shooting at an f4 aperture. But if you're being real, f4 is still a decent aperture and isn't crippling like an f6.3 aperture, for example. It can still capture those images, but it's definitely something to be wary of. And on the other side of the coin is the 24-70, which is great in low light situations and works especially well when you're in a more controlled environment like portraits, events, or other types of indoor photography. In these scenarios, you're not as worried about the focal length because you can simply move your feet back and forth in order to get the exact composition you want. And since you're in a low light situation, it's more of a reason that the f2.8 aperture can be put to use. At the end of the day, you'll have to ask yourself whether having an extra 50mm or a twice as fast aperture is more worth it. For some photographers, like me, I think having that extra 50mm is far more worth it. Since I'm super focused on composition over everything, and the niches I shoot demand that more than having a fast aperture. But for others, you want that fast aperture to maximize bokeh and low light performance. It simply depends what you're shooting, because other than those two major features, these lenses are neck and neck. They both boast the same great image quality and perform extremely well when it comes to producing sharp images. It all depends on what you're shooting at the end of the day. So what lens would you rather have for your photography, the 24-120 or the 24-70? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Anyways guys, thank you so much for experiencing the world with me today, and please feel free to check out this video if you like this one.